Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to the High Street Regeneration Finding the Money event. This is an open high street event which is part of the Architectural Heritage Fund's Transforming Places Through Heritage programme. We've got a fantastic panel for you this morning, including Mick McGrath from our partners LocalGiving, Asha Karbhari from the Architectural Heritage Fund, Chris Dormer from LocalGiving, and John Ryan from Oxford House. And we're also going to be hearing a little bit from Robin Nielsen from the George Community Pub a little bit after the panel session. I'll shortly be handing over to Mick, who'll be leading this morning's discussion, but I just wanted to say a few words before we start. We've got quite a few people that have booked on this morning that haven't been to our previous events. So I just wanted to say that if you don't know us, the Heritage Trust Network is the UK's umbrella organisation for those who are rescuing, restoring, managing historic buildings, structures and landscapes. We're a really thriving and rapidly growing peer-to-peer network with over 600 members across the UK. And we comprise groups and organisations from tiny groups restoring, say, a listed signal box to the likes of the Landmark Trust. Throughout the year, we run lots of training events and workshops and organise opportunities for members to network and see each other's sites. Over the last 2 years, we've run about 60 events for about 1,500 attendees, mostly online, obviously. And our members have said that they've never needed us as much as they do now. I won't go on too much, but I would recommend that you look at our website, check out the benefits of becoming a member, and book onto our upcoming events. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. My colleague Faye and I will be keeping an eye on the chat box, so please do introduce yourself there and add any questions you have for the panelists there. We'll be answering them later on in the session. The event's being recorded, so please do turn your camera off if you don't want to appear on the video. And as always, a huge thanks to the Architectural Heritage Fund and the National Lottery Heritage Fund for making this event possible. So that's it from me for now. No more babbling. Over to you, Mick. Morning.
Great, thanks. Hello, morning, everyone. I'm looking forward to this because I'm looking out the window here in Nottingham and it's grey and drizzly and not particularly a day for being particularly motivational. So as Bev said, this is part of a series of events we've been running, and this one, the focus is on finding the money. It's not a surprise that there's a lot of people here today. That often happens when you talk to people about their needs, and money, fortunately, is one of those things that always comes up near the top. So as part of this session then, I'm going to just give a bit of an overview, and then I'll introduce you to the other people as part of the panel. This session is what was supposed to be a face-to-face where we all sat in comfy chairs and just had a chat. So you have to visualise the comfy chairs and sort of having a chat with us. But nevertheless, hopefully, please do use the chat room in order to raise some sort of questions, and we'll get those answered. I'd also say, if you want specific information about Heritage Fund, one of my esteemed colleagues, Jeremy Fenn from Heritage Fund, is on the call as well, albeit he's one of the listeners, but if you want to ask him questions, please feel free to do that as well. So a little bang for your buck there. So, okay, moving on to why we're here, finding the money. Finding the money through funding is a real skill set in itself, but I think allied to that is finding the right skills within people in your group in order to allow you to progress is just as important. So, you know, you need to have the people who can write things in a clear way, which is going to help your cause and bring people along with you. It's also even more crucial now in these times where capital and revenue funding has not been available as part of wider funding because of COVID. And the reality is an awful lot of funding has gone into emergency support, that the number of projects seeking funding has probably built up. There's probably quite an extensive waiting list now of groups who have had to wait literally 2 years before they can really kind of get going. This has caused a lot of groups a lot of problems, but in the meantime, there's lots of groups also thinking about projects they want to run. So you've got this whammy, if you like, of lots and lots of people and not as much money as people would like in order to sort of make as good a dent in that sort of pile as possible. So, you know, there are those sorts of challenges which clearly need to be addressed. Costs are also rocketing, both in terms of staffing, professional fees, and also materials linked to increasing demand, linked to the wider inflationary sort of pressure, linked to lots of stuff being stuck in containers, God knows where. So, you know, with all of this also makes it more uncertain for groups in terms of the challenges, the concerns they've got of, okay, we managed to raise the money we needed 3 months ago, but now it's gone up by another 20%. Where do we get that money from? You know, these are all sort of challenges that people have got. Similarly, I would hope that funders are being patient and have been patient. So, for example, I was talking to Sport England a week or so ago. They have been patient with one of their programs, community assets, where they've in effect been waiting over 3 years with some groups in order to give them the time to try and find the other funding they need as part of their proposal. But, you know, that's not going to be infinite either, is it? So, you know, there are challenges about understanding how patient the funder's going to be. It's also about thinking about your funding cocktails and the need for income from several different sources. The speakers will talk about income generation, grants, benefactors, donations, service delivery loans, share offers, and other ideas. So, you know, if you come away with anything from today, if you've not looked at the wider gambit of the wider funding opportunities, then please do consider those. That can be a challenge to move from the mindset of, well, we'll go for grants, but, you know, we don't want to put our literally mortgages on loans, and thank you very much. But, you know, it's about looking into it wider than that. Also, because of this situation we're in, I think, will we ever go back to normal? I'm not sure what normal is anymore, but one thing we do know is that we need to accept that we need to have new and creative approaches. And again, some funders are very much on board with that. And Asha from the Architecture Heritage Fund will tell you more about some of the fact that, you know, they have blended grants as well as loan opportunities. So personally, my experience is that projects which have good communications, clear messages, are better equipped to take advantage of the wide range of opportunities. I mean, ultimately, if you're talking about things like loans or share offers, you need to have a good story to tell. You need to be able to sort of galvanise and motivate people in that way. So, you know, they're much better able to sell their idea much more widely. And so, you know, these may be new skills that some of you will need to develop, and hopefully through some of this conversation, you may find examples of where to find them as well. So this session will be a chat between the speakers, sharing their experiences, but of course, we're also interested in your thoughts. So, you know, please do follow up with examples of where you've done things and how they've worked and so forth, as well as part of the chat. So what I'm going to do now is ask the panelists just introduce themselves, briefly say who they are, and a little bit about their funding experience. And I'll kick off with me. So I've been a long time in funding. I was with the Big Lottery Fund for 12 years, and I also supported groups and have supported groups with community share offers, community-led housing, which is one of those programs where groups are realizing that actually by having assets such as housing, they can generate income, which is an easier way then of constantly trying to chase the funding. I've also been supporting groups through Space Hive, which is a crowdfunding platform. And I'm also a resilient heritage mentor for the Heritage Fund, and I chair the East Midlands Funding Forum. So that's a little bit about me. Asha, can I ask you to sort of say a little bit about yourself, and then John, and then Chris, and then we'll move on to some sort of onto the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. Hi, everybody. It's so good to see so many people on this session. So yeah, I'm Asha Karbhari. I'm the investment manager for the Architectural Heritage Fund. And I guess similarly to Mick, I have been in the funding sector for quite some time. And I started off with the Big Lottery Fund as well back in the heyday. So, but a lot of my experience post kind of Big Lottery Fund has been in kind of the social investment sector. So looking at blended finance, grants and loans, community shares and such forth. And coming up to 4 years, having worked with the Architectural Heritage Fund, it's been predominantly about built heritage and getting, I guess, community organisations looking at taking ownership of community buildings and restoring them and then, you know, using them for their own enterprises. So I guess it's fair to say, and I know there'll be people on the call from AHF who've got more experience about the AHF than I have, but the AHF has moved, I guess, in terms of their remit as well. So before it used to be set up for traditional building preservation trusts and organisations such as those, whereas now it's very much about, you know, community organisations, social enterprises, as well as, you know, the traditional building preservation trusts as well. So yeah, our remit has, you know, has expanded, and yeah, and the experience and the skills that comes within that as well.
That's wonderful. Thanks, John.
Does the unmute button? Got the hang of that. Hello, everyone. John Ryan. I'm the Chief Executive of Oxford House in Bethnal Green. Oxford House is one of the original settlement houses that some of you may or may not be familiar. Victorian organisation set up to combat poverty, and Oxford House is still here. I was going to say I joined Oxford House in 1884 when we started, but it wasn't quite true. It was only 2008, so I've been there a while. Oxford House, kind of imagine, it's been around so long, it's kind of changed what it's done over that time. So its roots very much anti-poverty. What that meant originally was volunteers living in the place, spending their time setting up all sorts of projects, which over time have become part and parcel of community development and welfare state, from adult education, running youth clubs, poor man's lawyers, which was kind of legal advice and so on, and a whole variety of stuff, particularly around arts and culture. We're still here. We're still in the same building, which has changed over the time since it was built in 1891, an extension in 2003 with Arts Council money, and then more recently a heritage project finished formally December last year. We've got everything from loads of office space to a theatre, cafe, meeting rooms, dance studio, even an old Victorian chapel. So we've got a bit of everything in there in one space. Really briefly about me, I'm not a fundraiser by tradition. I'm not a heritage geek. Well, I am a kind of heritage geek, but that's another story. But I don't come from the industry, as it were. I've worked in housing, community development, and stuff like that over the years, as well as other jobs in other sectors. So I don't think there's any one traditional person who comes into this. So not a fundraiser. So I've learned fundraising. So you don't have to have those skills to do this, but you can learn pretty quickly. And what else to say? No, I think that's enough. I'll say more as we go on.
Okay, that's great. Chris?
Hi everyone, happy Friday. So my name's Chris. I'm the managing director of an organisation called LocalGiving, and worked at LocalGiving for 12 years now. And we're a online fundraising platform set up specifically to support sort of grassroots, community-focused organisations and provide them with training and support to engage with online fundraising, crowdfunding, and raise funds towards their work and around digital marketing and other digital skills. And really, my sort of area of expertise is helping organisations with delivering crowdfunding campaigns and digital fundraising campaigns, and working with other partners to deliver match funding campaigns. So last year we ran a £1 million match funding campaign with DCMS, and working with a range of funders as well to now sort of do due diligence and distribute grants to local community projects as well. So hopefully able to impart a bit of info and guidance on crowdfunding, online fundraising, general fundraising from the general public, and also a bit around what funders are looking for, and a bit around match funding and the potential for that to be a way to help fund your projects as well. Yeah, and looking forward to today.
Thanks very much, Chris. Okay, let's start off with a nice, easy question. What do you think funders, investors are looking for and need to see as part of group proposals, albeit in an application or proposal? Asha, I'll start off with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, I mean, I guess we'll probably first touch on what Mick said at the beginning in terms of, because of the pandemic, and a lot of funders did freeze a lot of the funding programs, and a lot of social investors kind of froze their loan investment pots as well. So coming out of the pandemic, and as grant programs and loan finances reopened, I guess the focus has changed a bit as well with a lot of funders. So where you know, projects had not easy access, but access to large pots of funding, the criteria might have changed when certain funding grant programs have opened up. So I guess in terms of what funders are looking for might have slightly changed as well in a certain sense. And before, my first kind of what funders would be looking for are, you know, viable business models, evidence that there's need and there's demand, and the usual things like I guess a lot of you are all experienced in doing in terms of funding applications. But I think one of the biggest things organisations probably now need to look at is the impact of what their projects are now doing. So whether it's social impact, environmental impact, economic impact. I know there has been a big shift to environmental impact for funding projects. So that is something that, you know, organisations will look at. And even with the Architectural Heritage Fund, we have, you know, the Heritage Impact Fund programme, which was running the pre-pandemic, but, you know, that has, you know, we have finessed that a bit more as well in terms of having run the, you know, the programme for nearly 3 years. So we are looking at, you know, what impact is the project going to generate? Is it sustainable and is it viable? So those are probably the key things that investors and I guess grant funders are going to be looking for.
Thanks for that, Asha. Chris, what are your views? How have things changed for you?
Things have changed a lot. No, I think that in a number of ways, things have changed, but they haven't changed. And I think that obviously we're in a different landscape, but I think that from our side with fundraising, online fundraising, crowdfunding, and from our perspective as funders, we're still looking at making sure that projects have really done their research into the community and how they're going to benefit the people that the project's going to be serving, that there is buy-in from that community for the project, that they support it, and in some ways sort of running small-scale crowdfunding fundraising campaigns can evidence buy-in from the community. You know, 100 people, 200 people giving £5 towards a project really shows that they value the project, and then feeding that into funding applications, where I think that funders are potentially looking at more at match funding or providing part support to these projects. Being able to evidence a small-scale fundraising campaign not only shows community buy-in, but start showing that blended finance approach. And I think more and more we're seeing a bit more focus on sustainability and long-term sustainability around the plans. So how is the project going to be generating its own revenue further down the line, or income, or what does that look like? And also, I suppose, looking at, as we're here today, blended finance approaches. How sustainable is the project if there is a blended range of income, then the projects are less dependent on one specific funding stream, and they feel more secure to a funder sort of moving forward. But yeah, community buy-in, community research, what is the benefit to the community, and then how the funding is coming from multiple sources, and adding a bit more of a sustainability and a plan with long-term income generation. I think these are things that are sort of what our sense of the key things people are looking at the moment.
Great, thanks for that, Chris. John, from your perspective of doing this for a long time, have you noticed any particular changes?
A bit difficult to really say. I mean, because I could talk about our project, as I just said, having formally finished in terms of Heritage Lottery Support, who were our main funder, almost about 60% of the project costs, and that finished 31st of December, just gone. And we started probably with an initial application that was rebuffed because it wasn't good enough, which many people will probably have some experience of that as well, probably 4 or 5 years ago. So it's a different time and a place in one sense, but I think there are, as Chris and Asha were saying, I still think there's some constants in there about what people look for. Different funders, different things, of course, in as much as if you're looking at crowdfunding, I think crowdfunding, as Chris said, is not necessarily about the big numbers. It's about showing to your community that you can show that they actually support you. You can show that to other people, to other funders who are going to support you. We did that with a small element of our project. Our project overall was about 3.1 million, something like that. And we had a small element which was a crowdfunder just on the chapel, which is a small part of the building, but it was kind of like the emotional bit of the building because it looked lovely and old. It had buckets. There was rainwater pouring in. If you wanted to go for the heartstrings, which sometimes you do, I mean, in a way, it's like, yes, you've got to have all your other information, but you've got to have something that gets some kind of emotional contact. That was, we put in, we hoped to get 25,000. We ended up getting 31 out of it for a variety of reasons. I can say more later. But I think as a small element, it was just really helpful to get that for all the reasons that were said. I think that people are looking, funders, notwithstanding all those differences, kind of want a story, I think. They want a story that's believable. And that story contains all the other stuff which feels nitty-gritty and probably a bit dull, and you'll hate it revisiting the business plan for the 150th time, looking at those bloody spreadsheets again and so on. But they're so vital. They're part of that story, and they've got to be credible. And I say credible in inverted commas because I think there's a neat little line in how you show optimism and show reality, and hope that it works, because it's never scientific, I don't think. Isn't that the lesson of the last couple of years, that no matter what you put in as your risks, and I didn't put into my risk management a couple of years ago, worldwide pandemic, that's going to really, knacker us. 6 months into reopening after a project, the world has changed totally. So there's an element of that. I think about the story. I think there's something about the team of people that are selling you this story. I mean, selling in a positive way. I don't mean that crudely, because you've got to do that. And who that team is variety from the board of trustees, supporters, whoever they may be. You need to think about who they are and what skills they've got, and if you need to change, because you may have the right skills for when you're doing normal, but when you're moving into this new stage, you need to think about the people who are there. Whoever's leading it from the organization, if it's a me or somebody similar, or a project manager that you employ, yes. There's a bigger team. You're going to, depending on the scale and complexity of the physical regeneration, you're going to need, just like any other construction project, a team of a whole variety of building professionals who you probably don't come up against normally. Everything from cost consultants to project managers to architects to structural engineers, all these weird and wonderful ways in which we structure our building industry. They all need to be credible as well. You need to believe in them. You've got to find them. And then I think the final thing I'd say is clear outcomes. Sometimes funders help you with that. I think, you know, I'm a really big fan of Heritage Lottery because they gave us loads of money, and it probably said in the small print, I've got to say positive things about them. That's not true. I genuinely believe they have been a good and supportive funder, largely because they funded us to do development work, which we didn't have money to do, is the building blocks. But they were really specific about us addressing the outcomes that they had for the fund, and we had to really think about that. And you will, you know, people who've done fundraising know that's what you've got to do. So I think it's all of those things you need to think of.
That's very thorough. Thanks for that, John. Okay, we'll move on to another point I've been sort of pondering, and I'll start off with you, Asha, which is things different to what they were 2 years ago, and things in 2 years' time are going to be very different from the way they are now. We know that. How can groups renew their proposal, and, you know, sort of maybe getting up and running again if it's stalled, or if the funder's becoming impatient, or they're struggling with the sort of funding cocktail? So yeah, how do groups kind of get their project moving again? What would be your good advice to them? Starting off with Asha, then Chris, and then John.
Yeah, I think I guess with a lot of projects that have stalled over the last 2 years, and probably looking to revitalise or to move on with that. I think one of the biggest things as funders is what a project was 2 years ago might be very different to what a project is now, and that would include the costs of doing the project as well. So if you're looking at, like John said, in terms of the development phase, we know that, you know, there has been a cost increase in materials, there's lack of supplies, and then we've got the added worry of cost of utilities going up as well. So we visited a project a couple of weeks ago where they're looking at a potential increase in their fuel costs, energy costs of £10,000 a year. So it's taking all those into consideration. So as much as, you know, we hate to revisit business plans and cash flow forecasts, I think that is something that organisations need to revisit on a regular basis now, as the world is changing on a daily basis now. But to help with those kind of, you know, getting your business plans and your cash flow forecasts back together, to review them again. If you are eligible for the AHF's kind of project viability grants or project development grants, those are still open. So in England, we've got the High Street and Town Centres Fund. So if your project is based within a high street or a town centre and you meet that criteria, those small pots of grant funding are still available. And I'm sure there's other grant funders now got programs open that would be able to help you with those kind of development costs to put into place. So yeah, I think one of the things would be, I mean, obviously we can never 100% foolproof a business case or a viability of a business going forward. And I think the last 2 years have kind of demonstrated that. So the other thing is to do as part of the, you know, revisiting your business plans and cash flow forecast is to look at the risk assessments as well. So consider what an impact, you know, how would your business model fall within, you know, if another, you know, pandemic hit, or with the fuel prices increases, you know, how would that impact on your business model, and not go into it blindly. And I think that's what I guess funders would want to see in their proposals as well, is to see that the organisations have had a thought about that. Yeah, you might not know the solutions to that, but at least, you know, you've taken that into account when moving forward.
Great, thanks, Asha. Chris, from your perspective, what are your feelings?
So I suppose from my perspective as a sort of marketeer and a fundraiser that focuses on digital, I think that, you know, things have obviously changed a lot over the last 2 years. But I think with a lot of change, there's always a lot of opportunity. And I think it is a really good time for people to review and think about how they are marketing, promoting their projects and the communities that it's serving. I think, you know, the lockdown has made a lot of people, whilst they've been at home, they've been in their communities, they've been focused on their communities, they've been walking around more and spending time closer to the, you know, the buildings in their local area, and are much more, I think, in some ways aware of what's happening, and have maybe been involved in community projects, you know, mutual aid movements or food bank movements or anything where they've actually come together to help their community in this difficult time. And I think that is an area that is obviously, you know, as a marketeer, you can look at how do we leverage that community feeling and engage in these completely brand new networks of people that have all come together to support their community. And I think with fundraising and marketing, you're always trying to find those groups of people that believe in things that, you know, that you also believe in and that you think were aligned with your project. And if your project's focused on the community and serving the community and providing a solution for the community, then there are all these brand new networks of people that have come together online, in person, in response to the pandemic. And as a sort of, you know, from a marketing and fundraising perspective, those are essential groups to be reaching out to, engaging and speaking with. I think that there are other opportunities there, that the way that people go about their lives is very different now. You know, people have moved into new areas and are looking for things to help them engage and integrate them into new areas where they've moved. I think that you have a lot more people working from home on a more regular basis. Are there opportunities there for the service delivery that you're doing, or other aspects of your project that can look at these things which people are aware are not changing? You know, people are going to be working from home in maybe a hybrid way in the foreseeable future. And how can your project support those people or engage those people? I think just around on the sort of digital side of things, we've, from sort of crowdfunding and online fundraising, we definitely feel that we are sort of moving into the sort of late majority side of the adoption. I think that a lot of people have had to digitalize the way that they make transactions and fundraising, but just people buying shopping online and getting that delivered because they've been shielding, they haven't wanted to go to the shops. So we've got a lot more people making digital transactions and feeling more confident with parting with money online, essentially. And we've definitely seen that. We've seen basically somewhere between a 50% and a 75% increase in the donations coming through our platform. And we've also seen the other area that we've seen a big rise is communities utilizing WhatsApp for their marketing. So actually, you know, traditionally people have looked at Facebook and Twitter and different social medias. We've actually seen a big uptick in communities coming together on WhatsApp, and that being a main mouthpiece. I had a friend that runs a restaurant, and he basically had to shut the restaurant, and he got all the local community on a WhatsApp group, and he did a daily meal and put that out on WhatsApp, and it's the best marketing tool that you could ever have. So we're seeing a lot more donations coming through via channels like that, which is an area of interest. And then I think, yeah, just falling back a bit on what I've touched on before and what we're saying, you know, there's a lot of funding going into emergency response funding. Are the funding pots still the same as they were in the past? I'm not sure. And so having a creative approach where you proposition match funding, for example, to a local authority, which we're seeing more local authorities thinking about supporting crowdfunding campaigns through match funding. I I think being aware that the funders may not have all the money that you might need for that project, and having a more innovative approach to them about how they can support your project, but keeping the consideration that then the purse strings could well be tighter, and sort of doing, you know, putting the innovation to them, doing their job for them, coming up with creative ideas that then they can take ownership of internally and say, oh yeah, we've got this, you know, this great idea that we're doing here. But yeah, that's my sort of feelings.
That's really helpful, Chris. And I suppose the one thing I was getting out from that was something that's been said a few times now, is that if you haven't got people with those skills within your group, then maybe that's an area where you do need to be looking to reach out and try and find those sort of people with those skills, because clearly this technology is not going away. It's only getting faster, and clearly it's even embedded into our lives even more in the last couple of years. So it's not going to go backwards, I don't think, is it?
No, I think that we are past the part where a project has a specific digital bit, which is sort of this closed off area which one person is responsible for. All of the strands of your project need to have a digital layer within them, and so that is bringing in people into the organization, or having, you know, going out and getting training and getting support for this is really important for the organization. And really focusing on marketing, I always think is something that quite often falls down the list, but actually marketing is really important, because it's a way that not only gets your project out there into the public at the beginning when you're trying to raise funds and raise community engagement, but after that you've then got a very well an experienced marketeer with your organization, with your target market, with what you do, that really understands your project, who is then going to be marketing it to the community once your project is up and running, and driving engagement and community buy-in post sort of the funding period afterwards, so that you're getting people in the door, if it's, you know, a community pub, for example, or a cafe, and that you're able to market that, so that then you're generating more income at the back after the funding period has finished.
That's brilliant, thanks. John, is there anything else you want to add? And you probably covered some of these aspects in that previous question, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to sort of talk about.
No, I think I'd only everything that's been said is absolutely right. Just that bit about renewing the team of people, and whoever that's going to be, not so much the paid team, but it might be if you're at that early phase, it's the pro bono support. For example, we did our big project, we had pro bono support before we got into the lottery development money. And we want to do another project in the building now where we've got another bit of a water leak, and another, it's never ending. It's like the fourth road bridge or rail bridge. But we're going to have to we're already starting to build some pro bono support there. I mean, in one sense, I'd love to be able to pay for, you know, the technical team to do it, but we haven't got the money to do that. So we're going to almost go back to the lessons that we had to do 4 or 5 years ago. Have we got some pro bono tech people who will help us do it? Yeah, we have. And we're going to use that in the same way. So it's a different bunch of people. I've had to spend more time getting to know this lot, trying to find out why they're suitable, how they can help us, and so on. So that part of it. And then I did mention the board, and or your those informal people that you want to get advice from, whether that's on a one-to-one basis, providing mentoring and support. But you don't necessarily want everyone to come and join the board. I mean, that can be a bit onerous, and not everybody is up for doing that. Everybody will be aware of that, I'm sure. But if something's stalled, then maybe it's, you know, people are tired with it. Either find things that can give you small successes, or maybe you have to change some of the people involved. Maybe, and that's right, have those conversations and say, it's okay, you've done your bit, we're at a new phase, we'll change. You have to reinvent your board. And I think we've had probably 4 iterations over the 13 years I've been there in terms of big changes. And it'll have to change again, I'm sure, in probably a year or two's time, we'll probably have a new chunk, maybe a third or so of trustees will change. And I think that'll be right, because our challenges are different.
And how do you go about finding these people? Well,
how do I find them? I mean, all sorts of ways. Personal networks can be quite good. Definitely put stuff out that way through talking to people that you know. Thinking closely about people you know as well, and think, might they be suitable? Is it a direct approach to somebody you think, actually, how I know the way you work and the skill set that you've got, you might be the right person. Then you've got to have a different conversation, because they may not think of themselves as being that person who's a potential trustee. Formally, through other things, what we noticed was a couple of years ago, just no real reason, but 2 or 3 women on our board stood down. It just happened, and it totally changed the dynamic. In one sense, we lost our diversity on the board, and so we looked outside, and I went to Women on Board, which was a kind of network. I went through, we have something called East London Business Alliance, which is one of those kind of straddles the corporate world and the community world, finding people with business skills that might be there. But there's also people in your community that you might want to have on board specifically. And then, as you know, Chris was talking a lot about the digital. Do you have those skills? And we didn't a couple of years ago. We have, and we've just lost that as somebody who stood down. So we need to recruit. Well, we've partly recruited somebody with those skills, does digital marketing for retail stuff. But we need some more. So I think you just have to put the effort in and realize it's going to take a bit more time. And often with all of this process, it feels like, oh, not another blooming thing to do. I haven't got the time. But this is something that's going to, this will pay off. And it may not just be the me of this world. It could be somebody else who's got to do it in your team, whoever that team is. But you're going to have to do it, because if you miss those 2 or 3 people, you miss that energy and those skills and that talent. So put the time in. We spent 3 or 4 months all last summer talking to lots of people. In the end, not as many people came on board, but we found 3 new female trustees with the right skills and the right diversity, local, and so on. And it was well worth it. We only needed 3 in the end, and it was successful.
Fabulous. Thanks for that, John. I'll sort of follow on that with what do people need to put in place in order to provide clear outcomes or tell their stories? I'll start off with you, Chris. I know you've covered some of this, but I still think, particularly going back to that last point about the skills and making sure you've got the right people coming in. People are only going to get engaged if they're interested in what you're talking about. So, yeah, Chris, any particular ideas about that?
I think as with our sort of funders hat on, I think one of the things that we come across a lot is a focus on outputs rather than outcomes. And I think when you've got a big project with, a capital project, say, that you're trying to do a building of some kind, it can be really easy to focus on those outputs. We are going to do X, and from a funder's perspective, often you want to not only know that, but the actual outcomes. How is it going to help the community? What are the problems in your community that investing in this project is going to solve? So I think it's really important to split out outputs and outcomes, and I think that to really nail down your outcomes is to do research, engage the community, get them talking about what problems that they face, and try and build up a collective view of this is an issue in our area. This number of people or this percentage of people in our community feel that this is a problem, that you can track that and that you put the right things in place at the beginning of your project. I think a lot of this can straddle areas of of digital, in the fact that with digital, very, very focused on data and constantly reviewing that data. And digital is a great way to get people to complete surveys, to continue to get surveys out and track your progress towards your outcomes, and to make sure that you've got that all embedded within your project at an early stage. We've all found this brilliant tool called Zoom as well, which, you know, is making consultation and groupthink a lot easier, and actually, you know, it's an easy way to engage with your beneficiaries, to see how you are supporting those people in your community and the impact that you're having on them. And yeah, I think that's sort of my standout point. I think that getting a feeling of where things are at the beginning of your project can often be quite hard, or just quite low down the list, because you're desperately trying to fundraise and spending a lot of time on spending a lot of time engaging people and stakeholders that are influencers that are going to sign the check or, you know, sign off the payment. That sometimes focusing on the beneficiaries and the impact of your work and getting a good base level understanding of where that is, so that you can evidence where it gets to at the end of your project and from the work that you're delivering, can fall down to the side. But it's really important to get a good base set of data for everything, so that you can prove why your project has been such a success.
Fantastic, thanks. I was going to ask you whether you had any good templates, but people in the chat room have been sharing some sort of template ideas and themes. So this makes for a really, really good session if people do that as well. So thank you very much. Asha, from your perspective, and you know, I remember when I worked for the lottery, the #1 reject reason in applications was failure to demonstrate outcomes. Now, the reality is all funders, well, I say all funders, in most occasions, most funders are oversubscribed. So they need to find reasons in order to knock out projects. But from your perspective, Asha, is there anything particularly that you want to say about outcomes and maybe where people don't sort of demonstrate those? Because ultimately, if you don't demonstrate those, you're probably not going to get the funding. So, you know, whilst this may seem a bit of a going off at a tangent, it is very relevant. So yeah, Asha, over to you.
Yeah, I think outcomes is a real difficult subject, I guess. One of the things I guess as a funder, we'd like to see is realistic outcomes and deliverable outcomes, rather than organisations trying to fit the outcomes to the funder. And, you know, not that they're over exaggerated, but they might not be achievable. And then that's another discussion that you have to have with the funder further down the line. So in terms of the work that I do and the way I work with our applicants, is that I work through what the organisation is set up to do, what you're looking to deliver, and how we can pull out some of those outcomes that are deliverable and achievable. And I guess a lot of funders have now going to that approach, is working with applicants to look at what is actually achievable within what you're set up to do, and not going off on a tangent to deliver some outcomes for a funder. I know there's been some mentions of different models, and Kate's kind of mentioned the logic model within the chat group. But yeah, so whether you're looking at, you know, a theory of change type of model, and there's loads of templates of those as well as the business canvas model as well. These are all types of different ways of how you can kind of see the progression of your outcomes throughout the journey of what you're trying to achieve as well. So it's not something that can be, you know, deliverable on day one. And a lot of funders have now got their own kind of frameworks as well. So on the loan program that I work with, the Heritage Impact Fund, we have our own social impact framework, which is a very easy model, which a lot of social investors use. So it's not kind of trying to reinvent the wheel, but it's looking at what are those outcomes that you're looking to achieve. And again, for funders, it's looking at what can be achieved during the lifetime of, whether it's their grant or their loan, And I guess even to a certain extent, if you are doing fundraising through, I guess, crowdfunding or community shares, is looking at that, because obviously with crowdfunding and community shares, you've got a longer relationship with your investees. So it's trying to be able to keep those investees engaged throughout the lifetime of your enterprise as well. And obviously you'll get drop-offs along the way, but yeah, it's something to work with the funder and not trying to fit the outcomes to the funder as well.
Great, thanks, Asha. It's really good to have that perspective too. John, is there anything you want to say, or do you feel you've maybe sort of covered some of those aspects before?
Yeah, two very quick things. I think evaluation, as Chris was saying, absolutely. I think in hindsight, we did less of it than we should have done, and we did it too late. And we had funding for an evaluation framework and a consultant to work with us. We probably didn't have enough money in it, and we should have appointed the person right at the beginning, or whoever we were working with, and they should have provided us. It would have been helpful to have had them there all the way along. So I think, yeah, we learned that in hindsight. I think there's something in there which, and it could be part of their role, but other people's role is the kind of when you're assessing your outputs and your outcomes, is the critical friend kind of person. And it could be critical friends. Heritage Lottery have that with the kind of monitor role, who I must admit I was a little bit suspicious of first of all. I was just like, who is this person who's asking me all these pointed questions about stuff? They don't seem to be a grant officer. They have this kind of other role. And initially it was a bit like, but then I learned to love our monitor. And I did actually, because I realized where she was coming from was a supportive role. And there's a tendency, well, maybe I have a tendency, I'll own that one, is that sometimes, you've got to keep the thing moving. You've got to have a degree of optimism. There's some things you don't necessarily want to face at that point. You go, oh, sod it, that's just going to make me depressed, and I'll, move on. But you've got to deal with them, and you've got to find ways of doing that. And whoever fulfills that function on different bits for you is really important, because otherwise you'll push it to one side, potentially at your peril. You might get away with it, but sooner or later those things, if it's around outcomes and evaluation, they're pretty bloody important. If not on the current project, certainly for whatever you want to do next, and you want to tell the story of what you've just done and have evidence and so on, for everybody, funders, the community, and so on, then it's that important.
That's great, thanks. You mentioned some emotive words there, John, in terms of optimism, aspiration, keeping going. I'll ask this to all of you, but how do you keep the optimism and aspiration going? So, for example, the resilience when you're dealing with knockbacks, the timescales of the frustrations of nothing happening, or timescales of that huge bit of pressure on you that you need to find those final bits of the funding cake and you're struggling with that. Whether you've got the right kind of skills within organisation, support, rewards, training. How do you keep the optimism and aspiration going? So I'll kick that one off with you, John, then Chris, then Asha. Okay,
in no particular order. Often I go and hit the funding cocktail. I go and have a look at it and go, cool, can you drink the funding cocktail? Sorry, it's a little bit of a joke. I'd never heard of the funding cocktail phrase before, but I thought, maybe that's a new way to look at it. I think first of all, realize that it's going to be a slog and it takes time. So I think there's an element of, it's a tricky one, but you do have to pace yourself. I mean, looking back, as I was saying earlier, we've literally just finished the Heritage Project in terms of the grant, and we did the work, finished the work a year and a bit ago. And the actual physical works are about a year, 14 months, and an activity program around it. But that's taken years. I mean, it really is. And so I think you've got to be prepared for that and not let it put you off, but just think, right, this is going to take time. So I'm going to have to look after. So from my point of view, I won't talk about others in the project. I'm going to have to look after myself because I was the person leading it. Ideally, you'd like to get some funding to help support your role. I didn't get that. So I ended up doing my day job and fundraising, all this other stuff. So that added stuff on top. So how did I do that? I looked after, you've got to try and look after your health, obvious things. So my consumption of coffee probably was constant, and I think coffee for me is really important. One of the things about the project that I really liked doing was a bit of the project, which I thought it felt that there would be an output for this, which was there would be a photographic record of what we'd done, and that was partly through me just photographing everything to do with the building refurbishment, which is a hoot actually, and it's good fun, and you can. So I enjoyed doing that. I actually found someone else as a photographer who wanted to do it as well, who was much more experienced than me, and so working with him kind of gave it a more social side to it. But also what I was doing was providing a documentary of a building project, not just the physical stuff, all the quirks of building, which there's lots of amazing things you can photograph, he says, slightly nerdy. People, weird building construction and so on. But that was really important. And that became an exhibition that we did at the end. So Keith and I did this photograph, and it was great. And actually we sold the photographs as well. And we managed to flog some, which I was pretty bloody amazed at. So we got some money from it. I think your friends and your partner, or maybe your partner and your friends, whichever way around, are going to be really important in this, because it just slogs on. You've got to be able to go away from it and have a moan to people. You may need to have a professional moan to somebody who provides that mentoring and coach kind of role, without a doubt. And I suppose the other thing in this is there's something about reinventing yourself. I think as an individual, you kind of maybe have to do your Batman thing or your Batwoman thing. You have to go in and put on your new outfit. This is the new you. Because it's kind of true. I started at Oxford House in 2008 when it was a financial crisis, and it was like, oh God. Then, however, 6 years in, it was like, I can't keep living the financial crisis. It's got to be a more optimistic me. And I remember going away on holiday thinking, when I come back, I'm not going to say, and I'm not going to describe the place in the way that I was doing, which was partly a reflection of where we'd been. So there's things like that, and you actively have to think, who am I going to be in this next phase? Bearing in mind all the things I said about pacing yourself, being optimistic, being positive, pulling people along with you, all that kind of stuff. So you have to have an outrageous amount of energy and enthusiasm and so on. And then use humor if you can. I try and use it. Mostly it works. Sometimes it falls flat, but hey, keeps me going. If they don't get my jokes, that's because I don't really understand good humor, I suspect. All of that, very important.
Well, fabulous, thanks very much. Chris, from your perspective?
Yep, I'll be conscious of time. I think three main things that I want to point out. One is don't work in silos. Like everyone has an important job to do, but the project as a whole is everyone as a group. And I think that obviously you don't want anyone, doing like rebuilding certain parts of the building. But I think there are lots of things where it's really important to have everyone engaged and involved across your group, your organization. We see it so much in fundraising where it is like, this crowdfunding campaign is being run by this one person and none of, that's their job and none of us are involved and, it's all on them and they're to blame if it doesn't go right. And I'm always amazed at the number of crowdfunding campaigns that launch, and 2 out of the 10 people in the organization have shared it on their Facebook page, or there's not been a coordinated approach across everyone in the organization to launch it, to promote it across all of their networks. I think everyone in the organization is a fundraiser. Everyone is a marketeer. They are an ambassador for your organization, and making sure that people don't feel isolated on projects, in particular around fundraising, is really, really important. And that goes, across the whole project. We're talking about evaluation, etc. The number of projects we have funded in the past, where the people doing the service delivery don't think that they're responsible for the evaluation. That's someone else's job, the monitoring and evaluation. So they're not bought into building up the evaluation and the monitoring data while they're delivering the service, even though often they are the best placed person to be gathering that data. What you're all trying to do is incredible and very, very difficult. So you will fail. There will be times where things don't go right. And I think it is really making sure that as an organization, you treat failure as a learning opportunity, not the end of the world, and to try and take a positive approach to when things don't go right, and also to celebrate those successes, and even if they're little wins, having a lot of positivity around them is really important. So breaking down the project into small parts so that you can, the wins happen often, and they might be little, but there's a celebration often along the way. And I think just one thing really specific to crowdfunding and online fundraising is I see it a lot where organizations, you're so focused on trying to get the money and the donations that you sort of hit your target and you're like, we've done that now. But actually, you really need to have time focused on the sort of donor care and the aftercare for the people that have bought in, supported your organization financially or with their time. Because I always think the best thing for a community group or an organization, how does everyone in that organization feel great? It's when someone has come in to support the organization, gone on the journey with you, and has become a sort of ambassador for your organization and talked about how brilliant it is. And that comes from that sort of donor care, where you take someone from being a small donor or maybe even a volunteer, like along a journey where you've looked after them and supported them, to then being, your biggest fan and talking to all their friends about it and spreading the word. And that can be really important for when you're working on a project, you're deep into it, having people from the outside who have joined you on that journey, but really talking about how amazing you are. You can't beat that for staff morale and for how you feel and the positivity around your project.
Great. I felt though there's a certain amount of cathartic therapy coming out on you there, Chris, but all very good. Asha, anything you want to say before we sort of move on to listen to Robin for a few minutes?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of keeping organisations, optimistic and aspired throughout the longevity of the project, it's quite hard for a funder to probably do that, other than be open and honest with you and be realistic about timescales and not raise expectations, and to work with you to as you go through the pitfalls and and the rises of how the project's developing. So yeah, I don't have anything else to add for that.
Okay, that's brilliant. Hopefully you found that useful, interesting as a sort of conversation. We've got two bits left now. Robin from George Community Pub in Wickham Market is going to tell you briefly about their community share offer. I think they're on the second one now. And then we'll finish with questions and answers from you, possibly amongst yourselves, but also obviously that's part of the sort of the panel of people. So Robin, hello, welcome, and you've got a few minutes to tell us about your story, which would be great to hear. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. I hope everyone's hearing me. I was going to sort of preface this by saying that probably we're not a typical heritage trust, but looking at lots of the chat and hearing a lot of the discussion, I think we're closer to many than I'd imagined. We're a community benefit society. Our purpose is to restore our listed part 15th, 16th century village inn, which was badly damaged by fire several years ago, 2013. As a group of volunteers, which I have to say over the years has evolved, and we've found people with very valuable skills were luckily available to us. So in 2016, there was a planning application to demolish this building. And that's really when the community got involved. Started with a parish council meeting with well over 100 attendees, and volunteers were asked to see if we could work on the community ownership of the pub. From the very earliest start, we had assistance from Plunkett Foundation, obviously community ownership advocates, and from the very start from the Architectural Heritage Fund. We'd like to express our thanks to them particularly for their support throughout the project. And really without them, both literally and figuratively, we wouldn't be here today. One of the first pieces of advice was to join the Heritage Trust Network. So from Plunkett, we obtained startup funding, partly to establish ourselves as a community benefit society. And it also funded a village-wide survey to establish that there was a desire and a need for a pub, once again in our community of about 2,300 people. We got positive responses from approximately 2/3 of the adult population, which astounded us and sort of encouraged us to set us on the way. Established as Community Benefit Society in December 2016. Next stage was viability appraisal, again supported by the AHF. We also had support from our local councillors through their own discretionary locality and enabling communities funds. And one of the big aspects of this stage, as well as establishing the actual viability of the project with the help of architects, chartered surveyors and QSs, was also to research funding. And we, in 2018, after completing the viability study, we decided to proceed. And obviously a key part of this was our community share offer, and the other key part was obviously going to the National Lottery Heritage Fund, Heritage Enterprise support. So we launched our share offer in May 2018. Minimum share price £50, generated over 320 members of our society, and about £130,000. Our first applications to the Heritage Enterprise National Lottery Heritage Fund was not successful, but they gave us some very concrete reasons why. And I think that's a very important thing when you're, as the message is, you know, you learn from your failures. So in 2019, we went back with probably a much more focused application, certainly a much better application. The principal things were, as a volunteer group, we thought we could project manage ourselves. Heritage Fund didn't agree. There were issues over the amount of new build incorporated into the restoration, and also there was still a lot of uncertainty about our funding. I mean, so those were the points raised. So throughout, we've been consulting the community, and we actually asked our members in 2019, do you want us to continue? Overwhelmingly, they said yes. So we applied again, and in December 2019, received our round one award. So 2021 basically taken up with project development, again with support from AHF, with a full design team, mentoring from Heritage Fund, ROSS, the mentor, and also from our case officer. We've had a lot of support from case officers. I think the thing is that it's a symbiotic relationship. It's not us trying to please them, it's both of us trying to get the right outcome. So we completed the project development phase May 2021. Our round 2 application was then made. In the meantime, we'd also obtained planning permission for the detailed design, and we were awarded our round 2 grant of nearly £1 million in December 2021 last year. In the meantime, we've also been looking at a second share offer. So we'd applied for Pathway 1 community share booster support to develop that and obtain the standard charter mark. Sorry, the standard mark, share offer standard mark. And in fact, these were part of the elements that we needed to get permission to start, which we've from Heritage Fund, which we've just achieved. We had a mixture of funding throughout, including some local individuals being prepared to underwrite at key stages if necessary. We've never had to call on those funds, but again, it's part of the funding cocktail. Finally, we've set up now a users group. That's about 16 people throughout the village who are representing other people in getting the views of the community into what actually goes into our building and how it will operate. Final good news, we've also, again, through essentially the architectural funding, we've received £50,000 worth of match funding through Community Share Booster. So this is obviously transforming High Street. So our share offer launched last week. We've got an application into the Community Ownership Fund, which is probably worth looking at for a lot of people, and a few other grants to tie up, and you know, ideally by December 2023, we will have a pub serving the village with community space, with a paid community engagement coordinator, and access for everyone. Thank you.
So Robin, I imagine that first drink in the pub will never have tasted so good when you have it, whatever it may be.
Well, some of the celebrations along the way have been great as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much for your time, Robin. That was really useful and helpful to have that perspective. Now I'll move over to Bev. I think you've got, hopefully there's sort of questions have been coming along the way. Can you use the remaining time to talk through those?
Yeah, we've got a question from Catherine from Community Action Groups Oxfordshire. She asked a really good question. She said, I'd love a conversation on how reliance on outcomes and outputs serve to maintain status quo of power structures, particularly with community-led efforts, and serve as gatekeeping tools. What can we do to push forward conversations around other ways of evaluating impact? That is a really good question. Who wants to go first? It doesn't have to be the panelists. If anybody else has got a view, please do open your mic up and add your comments too.
Bev or Catherine, I'm not quite sure I get the question. I don't know if Catherine wanted to come and explain a bit more on that.
Go on, Catherine, if you're happy to speak. I'm just looking for her in the participants list. Are you still here, Catherine?
Hello, sorry. I'm not the Catherine you're referring to.
Oh, hold on a second. Catherine, it moved just as I clicked. Catherine Chesson.
Wonder if I could just say something. I don't know. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think I think there's always a bit of tension in that role between where you sit as an organization and your broader community, and how you tell the story, how you relay the story, how you engage and talk to people. And Chris made some really good points earlier about that whole process of not forgetting about engagement and talking to and using every sort of opportunity, particularly sort of digital, to do that. But I think I start with that first thing, that it's recognizing that it's always going to be a bit difficult, because in a way you've got a whole bunch of stuff which you've got to tell funders, and funders aren't necessarily saying we want this in the simplest way to tell all your community members who may have no knowledge of all the stuff, other than that they might go, I want a fantastic place, that I want the pub saved in the village so that we can go in there for a coffee. I want a community shop that looks like it's been closed, or I want my community centre to be maintained. So I think it's almost, we're the people in the middle, the people who are leading the project, because you've got to look towards the funder, the supporters, and back to your beneficiaries, and find ways of translating it into appropriate language. And that might be simpler forms of outcomes, using the, and I think we can use clearer language, and sometimes outputs might be really helpful there as well as outcomes. So it might be, we are going to run 150 community events over 5 years. Count them. Hopefully they're going to be really good ones that people come to and they enjoy. And that sort of digital questioning might be surveys around, does it make the place a better place to live? Do we feel proud of our community? Do we feel more engaged? Are we talking to our neighbours in a way that we weren't doing before? All those sorts of things. But I think it's recognising that we sit up, there is a middle role, and it's going to be a challenge, and but don't duck it.
I think I've been trying to get my head around the question, and maybe being a bit slow, but I think that there's two interesting sort of things I've thought about. One is, and I think sometimes, so in projects in the past for myself, one of the things that felt like a bit of a tipping point into getting funding or not getting funding was that we developed and created an independent steering group from across a much wider berth of people that weren't actually part of the organisation, that were from the community that we're trying to serve. And that, I think, in some ways gave a voice to people outside of the organisation, and thinking about that as a way to maybe not just be defined by the outcomes and the outputs that you internally have thought about, and the project's really focusing on. I think that often, not that we can get tunnel vision, but that sometimes you sort of can miss some really, really interesting outcomes of your work. And so having sort of an external steering group, not just for show, not just to have that tick box in the funding application, can be really, really beneficial to the project. And I think, touching on that, if you are running a community focused project, I think that, yes, as I've said, getting your monitoring and evaluation in a good way, and having the data there, and following that through and tracking that progress, but also having open-ended evaluation with the beneficiaries that you're supporting, because often actually there are really interesting bits of information that you just got absolutely no idea about the difference that you've made to people, maybe in their broader life, that they've benefited from the project, but that benefit has actually helped them a lot in something else which isn't visible to you. And those sort of open-ended monitoring elements can also often be really useful with trying to look at maybe new phases of your project, that you can actually use that at the end of your core project to then go, oh, actually, this is making a big difference to local mothers because they're using our cafe when their children are in play school, whatever it is, but that can help feed and seed new ideas into how your project can move forward, and maybe take on new strands of work, or open yourselves up to potentially new funding opportunities as well.
Really good points. Thank you, Chris and John. Mike, you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in on that point, or have you got another question?
Yes, I would like to come in on that point, actually. Yes, I'm the finance officer for the George Community Pub. I work with Robin and others. And yes, I was struggling to understand the question, but John and Chris's points have actually made it fairly clear. And I have a valid point in that we have a management committee of about 10 people, 10 volunteers, and we have lots of professionals we work with. And then we have a village of 2,500 who want this pub. So we've set up a user group, which is along the lines that Chris has just actually laid out, of about 14 people to act as the spokespeople for the village on things like what they actually want the pub to feel like, some of the decor, some of the soft things around, and to act as a point of reference for us as a management committee, because we're very driven on the inputs to actually get the pub built, and we need all the rest of the community to come along with us. And so a user group, it is a sort of thing that is actually bridging that, and I think it's helping very much.
Thanks, Mike. That's great. It's such a great way of instilling that sense of ownership, isn't it? And everybody wants to be involved. Jeff, you've got your hand up. Your virtual hand, I should say.
Yes. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes. I think it was a really interesting point, and it's something which definitely resonated with the scenario we have where we're based. We're running a community makerspace and a creative incubator in Walsall in the West Midlands, and we're currently part of of Walsall's bid into government town deal funding, where we'll get capital funding to set up a creative industries hub. We're trying to align, we're looking at a heritage building or heritage buildings, which are currently the subject of an options appraisal. And I think the point which was made, I think is extremely valid in terms of existing power structures, how decisions are made moving forward. I'm really interested in where we're coming from, which is using creativity, creative industries as a tool for regeneration, but aligning that with heritage as a tool for regeneration, using some of the heritage buildings in town. And how can you bring about change to how decisions are made? We've got a lot going on in our town at the moment through things like future high streets funding, through town deal funding. They've just had a master plan done. And so what you normally get is a number of big players who dominate, such as life. Yeah, universities, colleges, housing associations, and that's how it kind of works in terms of the big decisions. If we're looking to put forward a project, which is a project not necessarily in isolation, but how can we bring about change in a bigger way through heritage? I'm really interested in how we can align with other activities in the town. Through some of the other events we've attended, we've seen examples like in Coventry, where they've set up a heritage trust to manage multiple buildings. That, to me, you've got a number of stakeholders coming together to bring about change in a strategic way and addressing where heritage can make a big difference to a city like Coventry. And so the point being made, and I think I definitely want to be part of that conversation if you're looking to put on some kind of event addressing those issues. How do you bring about change using heritage? How can you get small players mixing with the big players to bring about that change? So I'd welcome being part of that.
That would be great. Thanks, Jeff. I'll keep that in mind. Have the panelists got any views on this? I know there are some attendees here who might have views. I'm looking at you, Kate Dixon, but you might have an opinion on this.
It's a pity that Kate Dixon wasn't concentrating at that point. She was reading something in the chat. What do you think I might have a view on?
How do we use heritage to bring about big change? and sort of stand out as a little person amongst all those larger groups that tend to get involved?
Okay, well, it is.
Sorry, Kate, I've put you on the spot here.
Yeah. It's all about partnership, isn't it? And it's all about recognising how heritage can help you to meet your partners and stakeholders' objectives. So if you're starting out on a project, you need to understand your strategic context. You need to understand, particularly at this very difficult time, what your local authority is wanting to achieve in the local area, what the local enterprise partnership it has got in their delivery plan, and think, actually, how can my project help with improving digital skills? You know, that ticks as a box for non-heritage bodies. And if you're seen as an organisation that is relevant to a wider agenda, then I think you'll be able to bring the players round the table.
That's great. Thanks, Kate. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
Anyone else? Very quickly, to save me getting distracted again, Abby, send me an email and I will talk to you about gutter cleaning. I'll put my email in the chat.
We do get some interesting topics in these events, don't we? Does anybody want to come in on that point? And we've got a few people with hands up. David?
Hi, yes, I think just to pick up on Jeff's point, and yes, a lot of people are looking at Coventry. I think, you know, I lived there and was part of that trust right at the beginning. And I think what was critical to that was the chair of that trust having a vision for what heritage could do for the city and working to persuade the decision makers to adopt that vision also. I mean, it was helpful that it also solved a problem in that the council had numerous historic buildings that they didn't quite know what to do with and didn't really have the capacity to do anything with them. But there was also, alongside that problem, is turning that problem into an opportunity. And I think on a more general level, we need to be constantly making that case for heritage regeneration and for the sort of organisations we are. So the case for heritage regeneration is about how modern town centres work, and those arguments about people really wanting that authentic experience of place. And the fact that our buildings are often sort of catalytic in what they can do in a town centre, and they're often the ideal spaces for those creative industries. And because we're not creating a purpose-built building for this activity, that's a spark to creativity, because people often do things differently because they're fitting in and adapting to a building and so on. So I think that's a positive aspect. And I think as far as us as organisations, that actually we can be reasonably light on our feet. We can, we can respond to opportunities quickly in a way that the bigger institutions like councils and universities sometimes can't, or have to go through long processes and so on. So, I don't think it's helpful to call them dinosaurs when you're talking to them, but I think in some ways they're the dinosaurs and we're the mammals, and we're hopefully going to sort of inherit the earth.
That's great. Thanks, David. Dinosaurs and mammals. That's a first as well. Jeremy, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Bev. I'm not sure if I can follow dinosaurs and mammals, but I definitely agree with all of David's points there. So wearing so really good to hear from Jeff and about that project. From a Heritage Fund perspective, Walsall is an area of focus, and so there's a lot of engagement work kind of going on there. It's not my area of expertise, but I can put Jeff in touch with some of my colleagues. And also we've got there's somebody appointed through a project there, Benjamin Parker, who previously worked for the Heritage Trust Network, is doing a lot of work in that area. And yeah, there's some great opportunities here. especially in Walsall with the Towns Fund and all the other initiatives going on there. So yes, we'll see if we can get in touch with you, Jeff, and see if we can help out with that. Because there's so many opportunities for heritage driving regeneration and being really successful through working with the community. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jeremy. Jeff, I don't know if you wanted to respond to that or you have got your hand up.
I think what we've got out of the Heritage Trust Network is exactly what we need to get out to spread to some of our stakeholders, if you like. And so what's been such a shame about COVID is the opportunity to bring a group of people from our town to visit other projects elsewhere and hear firsthand. It's a cultural thing. It's about having conversations that they're happy to have conversations with. It's no point in me just singing, having the Sermon from the Mount. If we can go out and for councillors to talk to other councillors on other patches to find out what is the benefit to their town or their city. And I think, through this network, we can actually make those things happen. We've already identified projects up and down the country we're going to visit or we would love to visit, but not in isolation. We want to take the stakeholders with us, and then they can have those conversations that they're very comfortable in having.
Really good points, Jeff. Thank you. I think I'm going to come and visit you next time I'm visiting the family. I'm from about 2 miles away from Walsall. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Hi everyone, my name is Mark Clack. I run a community arts project that's been relatively successful with crowdfunding and match funding from the council. I'd just like to ask the question about, securing money from local authorities in a wider sense, and Section 106 seems to be, especially in London where property values are quite high, the Section 106 funding seems to be this nebulous pot of money which is very hard to obtain. Understand the right processes to try and access that. Obviously the councils, I know there's people from local authorities on here, so take this with a pinch of salt. It feels like it isn't always in the council's best interest to distribute Section 106 funding in a timely manner. Developers can ask for it back, but they won't if they want to build in the area. And I'm just wondering if anybody's got any tips about how Section 106 funding has been secured in the past, and if there is a more transparent process that other local authorities have adopted, or if anybody knows those areas outside of SIL, because I know that's slightly different, but how this pot of money for Section 106 can be accessed in a democratized way, really.
Panelists, have you got an answer for that?
Can I say a quick example? The group I've been working with in Derbyshire, they proposed to take over a community building. The local authority have never done an asset transfer before, but fell over themselves because they like what the group are doing, and as a result, and they're similar to yours, and as in it's working with young people, it's doing arts, it's doing health, a whole load of sort of different activities. But what they did, in addition to giving them the keys and an initial 10-year lease, and we're looking to push that further forward, was to actually say to them, here's some Section 106 money, it's £42,000, go and spend it please on developing up the building. Now I appreciate that's very much a one-off, and that's the only one I've probably heard of in the 8 years I've been working with locality, but occasionally you have to be cheeky and ask, and occasionally these things happen, but yeah, a lot of the time they don't.
I just add our example very briefly. It's out there. Local authorities do actually list, some of them are better or worse on it, what they've got in the pots. So have a look on the local authority. It'd probably be in the redevelopment side, the planning side. So they'll tell you what developments they've got, what the money's for, what it's meant to be spent on, whether it's health, community, enterprise benefits, all that kind of stuff is what they've said to the developer they're going to spend it on at some point in the future. So have a look at that. Get friendly with the key people in the local authority who can tell you more about it, maybe even interpret it. I was saying to the panel just before we started, I became best mates in a nice way, not in a sort of I'm looking for the money way, he says. I wear two heads, don't I? But and he was brilliant because he actually navigated that route, because there is the whole internal process of accessing that money. None of it, it's completely different to the fundraising we do, has similarities. and this is Tower Hamlets where we are. So he enabled us to put in an application to get, we got a couple of 100,000 for section 106. So it's there. Tower Hamlets is a busy developing borough anyway, but it's got a chunk of money, and I don't think everyone goes there. The other thing to think about is not so much just section 106, is loan finance. In the end, we went, and this is a different question, but I'll just chuck it in. We went to the local authority for loan finance in the end because they were the cheapest by getting money, accessing it via the Public Works Loan Board. We got a £730,000 loan, which we didn't, which we got grant, but we couldn't. We needed the money to make the project work. We borrowed it, and they are a good patient funder and financer, but it's ultimately it's on the property, so we've taken a risk. Sorry, Celia, I jumped in ahead of you there.
Thanks, John. Celia, you were frantically waving. Did you want to come in on this point?
I did. I want to ask, has anybody else come across elementary education trusts which actually own old schools, who are in fact all councillors? This links directly to creative industries in that we have an old school, the Omega Centre. The WEA used to be the major tenant, and a lot of artists, printmakers, ceramicists, and other artists actually use the building, but we can't get the councillors, who happen to be the leader of the council and the chair of planning, to talk to us about the future of the building. It's not listed, and basically it already is a creative hub. There are also boxers who have a very wide range of people coming from quite a long way, as well as locally, to use it. The heart of Portsmouth Boxing Academy, and also children who are behind with their literacy use the building. So it is a creative hub, but we find it completely impossible to actually get these trustees to talk to us. We suspect that they would quite like to let the building run down, and then they can redevelop it because of the pressure on Portsmouth to build new housing. Literally, they asked us in September what we wanted to do with the building. We all said we'll want to continue, thank you, but will you please maintain it? It hasn't been maintained since the WEA left. Can anyone help with a situation like that? There must be other places where elementary education trusts have been taken on ex-education buildings. We've heard about them. Some of them have been redeveloped. But in our case, we want to keep it. The building is a very solid board school of the 1890s.
Has anybody got an answer for Celia? If not, what I can do is hold on to that question and go around the panelists after the event, and we can come back with something for you. I'm just conscious that time's getting on, and there were a few
I did raise it with the Charity Commission, by the way, but that didn't help either.
You have to keep plugging your way, don't you? Has anybody got anything to add to Celia? If not, we'll come back to this after the event, and we'll get back to you.
Okay.
No. Okay, well, I'll move on to some of the questions we've got in the chat box because time is rolling on. Maxine said, I think Chris's point about getting everyone involved in marketing and showcasing the work that's going on within an organisation is good. I do think this is a cultural thing, though. Staff, volunteers and stakeholders all need to feel part of the movement and have complete ownership of the project outcomes to be fully engaged in the vision. Can I ask how panel members have developed this approach in their organisations and heritage projects? So to do with marketing and showcasing the work that's going on, making volunteers and stakeholders feel part of the movement?
Yeah, so I suppose it's my point, so I'll try and take it on. I think that regardless, all staff, volunteers, stakeholders do need to feel part of an ownership over what you are doing, and I think that that's always an important part of any really successful successful project. And I think that as leaders of projects, there has to be a real appreciation for everyone's view, and that, you know, that people have a chance to input into stuff, and as leaders you're selling the sort of the vision and the mission, but you are bringing the rest of the project team in. How are we going to achieve that vision, that mission? So I think that's something that I always try with the projects that I'm running, whereby, you know, I'm setting things on a very top line, but expecting the other people within the project to find solutions and to come up with ideas on how to achieve that sort of vision. And then I think that, yeah, then they become more invested stakeholders in what you are doing, and then it is easier to get them talking and doing what I spoke about, the marketing and promoting and networking around promoting the organisation, fundraising, etc. And I suppose also the other thing that I would say is that it comes from the top. I think that as leaders, you always set the tone for your project, and leading by example around that, and making sure that people have time to actually do those sorts of activities, that there is an appreciation that, you know, you don't just market and fundraise your project and promote it and do the networking without the actual time and resource allocated to that. So as a leader, can you give people time and an appreciation that, you know, you've got a busy schedule and these are what you're trying to work towards? How do we make sure that you have got that time to do those sort of soft strategic things, which are the overarching objectives for the organization? So I think a lot of the time it comes down to leadership and being willing to let go of a lot of stuff, so that it comes from the bottom up within the organization, and that you play a guiding role on that, and that you do appreciate that a lot of these things can be a little bit intangible. You know, I spend with a major donor, I probably have 18 months of working that relationship, 12 to 18 months before I make an ask. It's really difficult to track that with a key performance indicator. And there has to be an appreciation that relationships and building things take time. So as a manager, making sure that there is time in people's diaries that is available to doing those sort of soft strategic things, which the long term will pay off, but that may, you know, that there can be a slow play, or they have a role in the much bigger picture, which is when you do need to ask for that donation or run that crowdfunding campaign, that team member has had time dedicated to creating relationships with the council or with other stakeholders in the area that you can then leverage when that time is right. I hope that helps.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Really comprehensive answer there. We've got two more questions, and after that we'll need to start wrapping up. One from Alan, who says, Robin, can you say how community share offers work? It sounds like you've had two separate ones. Is there a return for someone who joins, or how easy is it to set up?
I think possibly the person to answer that question would be Mike again. He's been central to our organisation of share offers. So yeah, I'll hand it over to Mike.
Yeah, well, I'll speak very briefly. Yes, I've had a separate chat with Alan about this, and we've arranged to actually meet up after this meeting.
Oh, brilliant!
So the person who asked that will get an answer. But it is quite hard to do a community share offer, and you have to do a lot of research first to be certain that it will succeed, which means you end up talking to lots of high net worth individuals, to the general public. You do surveys, then you do pledges. And if they say, yeah, if you were to have one, I'd probably do this. And then you add it all up, and you have to make sure that you're probably going to get enough for what you need, because you don't want to do a community share offer and fail, because that's probably the one hit you'll get. So it is quite hard work, and I'm prepared to, yes, if anyone else wants to have a separate chat about it, send me a chat, and I'll contact you. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Mike. I mean, after this event, I'll be getting in touch with everybody that attended. So if you want to respond to that email with any questions that I can pass on, then I'll pass them on to Mike or any other of the panelists. Thank you, Mike. Last question from Harriet. She said, we're a newly registered charity, the Mint House in Pevensey, an iconic Tudor building. We need to raise the purchase price, and HLF take some time. There seems to be a lot of help for post-purchase and restoration. I'm going for private funders and crowdfunding with lots of community engagement. Is this the right approach? Has anyone else had this experience? Is there a right and wrong approach?
Hi, Bev. I'm happy to go in as a funder perspective, I guess, for this question,
Thanks, Asha.
rather than actual experience. But yeah, I mean, a lot of organisations find that difficulty in raising the finance to purchase before a project is developed. So if you can get a package of, I guess, a cocktail of, funding mix, then that's great. But where the AHF falls into is that kind of early stage support in terms of helping an organisation acquire a historic building. So if you do have a viable plan for the building, if the owner is willing to sell, and we do have the viability grants available to help you look at kind of the cost of the building. Are you getting a good price for the building? What are going to be the cost to kind of develop the building and take it on? With those things in place, the AHF could potentially help you with loan finance to purchase the building, and there are a lot of other social investors in the marketplace to help you, purchase the building through loan finance. So whether it's through the AHF or another social investor, or even through your mainstream bank, because it's an asset, you've got some collateral there, and a lot of funders might just fund 70% of the value of the building. So the AHF again can come in to kind of fund gap that 30% or 40% that you need. So if you wish, felt strongly about the building and the work that building could do for your, organisation, and you have that potential revenue generation built into the business model, then I wouldn't hesitate to consider loan finance or blended finance.
Yeah, thank you. Can I email you about it afterwards? Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Asha. Mick, is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Just first of all, thank you for attending. We've had a really, really good attendance today. I'm really, really chuffed and pleased about that. Hope you found it useful. We didn't just want to randomly talk about, oh, well, there could be this fund you could apply for, or that one. I'm sure you're all smart enough to know where they are and how to find them. But what we really wanted to do was kind of recognise there's been a hiatus for lots of people. You've had to pause, and lots of groups have used this time in order to sort of develop their thinking. I think for all groups, they should be using this time to develop their thinking, get prepared, be able to smarter to sort of use their networks to be more fluid, to do reviews, to develop communication, to think about things such as, digital funding, if that's totally new to them. We heard, that 50 to 75% increase over the last couple of years in that. So clearly, these are some of the ways to explore and develop. Keep looking at your skills needs as you develop and making sure you get the right people as you progress. And also, I'm a bit of a hugger, I'm afraid, but I think it's really, really important for people to look after themselves. These have been really challenging times. They remain challenging times for lots of people. So, you know, whilst it may seem a bit off tangent, it is very, very relevant that people do look after themselves, because if they're not, then their projects are going to sort of suffer and fail, and their communities and the people they serve. So, you know, it's really, really important to do that. So, yeah, I'd just like to thank you for your time and patience, and also thank you very much for the speakers who were excellent, made it, I think, hopefully a useful, interesting session for you. And yeah, do let us know if there's anything which you think we could do better. We're always interested in trying to improve. But yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the Friday, and hopefully you'll have a good weekend.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mick. Just before everybody goes, I would just say, if you've enjoyed this, to go to the Heritage Trust Network website and our events tab, because you'll see there are lots of similar things coming up on different topics. Talking about wellbeing, we've got a wellbeing event in Heritage coming up. An introduction to the Heritage Trust Network event next week for those of you who don't know us. So please go there, check out what we've got coming up, and hopefully we'll see you again. But thank you for attending, and massive thanks to all of our attendees. We'll see you soon.